So originally I was going to talk about communication in general and how it's developed in recent years. But I thought that because in reading the Daily Princeton over the past month, I saw a slew of articles about textual chemistry, among other things, and the role that texting has in our relationships, mainly about how texting messes up our relationships, and also the fact that yesterday was the 20th anniversary of the first ever text message. I thought it would be more pertinent to focus on texting. But first, I'd like to talk to you about the Bible. The Bible is a great source for analogies, and this is actually a perfect example for what communication can do for us when it's done well, and what communication doesn't do for us when it falls apart. So, this is the story of the Tower of Babel from Book 11 of Genesis, the Old Testament. And this is after God has drowned the whole world in the Great Flood, and Noah's descendants have rebuilt, and they're actually doing pretty well. You know, they all gathered together in one place, and they decide, let's build a big old tower, you know, so we never scatter, and we never forget, you know, who we are. But Old Testament God is a bit more meddlesome than New Testament God, and he just can't resist, you know, messing with them. So he looks down on the people building the tower, and he says, "Behold, there are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." For what reason, not necessarily given, but he does it, confuses everyone's language, and no one can get along anymore. So, of course, they don't understand each other anymore, conflict arises, and the tower is never finished. And this is an example of what happens when people can't communicate. But for people who do understand each other and who do communicate well, whatever they propose to do, you know, nothing that they propose to do will be impossible for them. So, what is communication in general? Well, most simply, it's, you know, the act of conveying information from one discrete source to one discrete receiver. And there are many ways for it to be done, but the way that we most commonly do it is through the use of language and speech. You know, we don't really think about it, but communication, human communication through language is actually very, very detailed and allows for very intricate, complex communication. So the best way that we can is spoken language, and here we have the Shannon-Weaver model of how communication works, and I'll just show a quick little demonstration of how it works with people. So we have the information source, thought floating above Barack Obama's head up there, and he wants to get that information to an endpoint. So what does he do? Translates the thought into intelligible human language inside his own head, so he has the words in his head. He makes them into a signal, words that can be heard. That signal gets received and processed by the receiver. And that processed signal, the words in the other person's head, gets translated back into thought. And Joe Biden gets the thought. So, so it's this basic process is just like you take thought, translate it into words, and then the received words get translated back into thought again. But so words are the basic medium by which we translate thought from one person to another. So if you ever heard the saying, "Picture is worth 1,000 words," I don't think that's necessarily because pictures are very, very good at conveying meaning. I think it's because words are not very good at transmitting meaning. You know, the basic language theory tells us that words in and of themselves don't mean anything at all. You know, they don't refer to anything at all, but they have meaning in spoken language based on their differences from other words. So, if verbal language only has significance because of complex rules and conventions that have developed over thousands and thousands of years. And, you know, that's what gives particular combinations of words certain meaning. Luckily, however, we have things like body language and nonverbal communication. But while there are tons of guides and apparently Wikipedia articles on how to read body language, it's not something that we necessarily consciously do. It's subconscious. Just like we don't think about how we're going to turn thoughts into words, we also don't think about, like, what does it mean if somebody's smiling at me when they're saying something that's nice? Well, they're probably being genuine. What does it mean if someone's frowning at me crossing their arms and stepping to me. It means that they're probably angry or upset, depending on the context of the words. But what if we were to remove all body language, all facial expressions, and everything from how we verbally communicated? Well, we'd end up with text message. So you have this form of verbal-only communication, which is extremely ambiguous, especially in its syntax. So texting is very different from other forms of written communication, like letter writing or just simply reading a novel. For reasons I'll get to in more detail later, but one of them is because of the ambiguity that exists in syntax. So this arises from its informal shorthand nature. You know, the first text message was limited to 160 characters. So in text, there are many different ways to express some idea, but it's always expressed very differently and sometimes creatively due to the space constraints. So for example, let's say I wanted to shoot off a greeting to someone through text. We just do a little simple, hey, hi, or a hey. Probably the sleaziest text in the history of texting, you know? And so while they should all transmit the same essential meaning, they clearly don't. What if I'm just trying to agree with someone? Okay. KK, I'm being cute. Or K, period. The most passive-aggressive text in all of it. Now, say somebody's told me a joke, and like, I want to respond to that. I want them to know. I thought it was funny because, you know, it's only polite. LOL. Am I actually laughing out loud? Ha ha ha. Is the thought ha 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 running through my head? Or am I one of these psychos that does the all caps? One of those. You know? So they should all express the fact that I thought what you just said was humorous, but each has a very different meaning when you see it on the screen in front of you. And even something as simple as ellipsis, this is a scene from the office. 3 dots means to be continued, 4 dots, it's a typo. But 5 dots means, wow, don't make me say what I want to say, because if I did, it will blow your mind, dot, 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 dot. So you can see that there are distinctions that set these different examples apart from each other, even though they should convey the same basic meaning. But there's no formal set of conventions that governs text speak. So everyone texts in slightly different ways and unique ways, but we're each somehow speaking in a different language. So what also sets texting apart from other forms of written communication is the timing. You know, it has no formal time limit. For example, like, let's say you're carrying a conversation on late into the night, and all of a sudden you think, like, do I have to stay awake so I can wait for the next text, or can I just please go to bed? And then there's the problem when courting is going on through text messaging. When the boy you like or girl you like texts you, do you wait? You're supposed to wait at least as long as it took them to reply, otherwise you look desperate. Right. If you send 4 text messages in a row, if they're not replying over the course of 6 hours, does that make you look desperate? You know, can you respond to a text the next day? Can you take time to think about it? Does a conversation ever really end, or are they just put off? And so all these questions have different answers for different people and in different situations. But again, as before, not everyone is playing by the same rules. Then there's also the question of intimacy. Text conversations are by nature remote, not immediate, and it leads to a lot of this going on, where we're so focused on the screens we won't even make eye contact with people around us. So the same kind of intimacy you would have when you're speaking to someone in person doesn't really carry over to text. You know, text conversations prioritize the remote over the immediate, and they don't require too much intimacy. And so they're not a good medium for deep interpersonal interaction. But you know, the problem is that we're spending so much time texting on our phones, more time vastly than people spend doing phone calls nowadays, and more time even than you might spend face-to-face with someone. Especially, like, I'm in a long-distance relationship, so I know from experience, like, I spend a lot more time interacting with my girlfriend through text than I might face-to-face if I don't get to see her for a few weeks. So this medium, it's just letters on a screen. It's not good for deep interpersonal connection, interpersonal communication, but it kind of requires us to sometimes try to be intimate. So they also provide a constant source of social contact, which Sherry Turkle, in her TED Talk on a related topic, she said, when she was discussing how text work, she said, people are comforted by being in touch with a lot of people who they keep at bay. We always have these people around us that are just a button push away, but at the same time, they're also held at arm's length. So, what is the role of texting? You know, the truth is it's used more and more every day, and it's used in all kinds of situations. If you need to shoot a brief message to someone, it's used in courtship, it's used in making plans, it's meet at 8, it's used in conversation just to say how you're doing, used in business even, used for staying in touch, and it's used for all the above. The role of texting more and more is becoming for everything. It has a time and a place for everything. But despite the fact that we're using it so much and relying on it so heavily, it is still very much a frontier technology. And it is very new. I said it was the 20-year anniversary yesterday. Well, think about that in terms of the time that it took for human language to develop. Or the time that, not even spoken language, but just nonverbal, smiling, making eye contact. That's been, evolving for thousands upon thousands of years. And, so texting has got 20 years. But it's not had the time to develop these kind of conventions and subtleties and nuances that regular forms of communication have. We don't have emphasis, we don't have sarcasm, we don't have intonation, and we don't have the ability to smile at someone to show we're being genuine, or the ability to frown when we're legitimately upset through a text. And so, we're all speaking in slightly different textual languages, not unlike the people of Babel after the confusion of the tongues. Guess what? Text messaging is evolving. And as silly as it seems, things like emojis, these little symbols, are actually doing a good job to help disambiguate some issues with syntax. For example, these are symbols, not words, so they actually look like the thing that they refer to, and they can provide a concrete, unambiguous way to augment what we're talking about. Additionally, technologies such as autocorrect that you have on every iPhone make it so that everyone is speaking at a certain basic level of human legibility, so that over the next few years, hopefully, it will move from a very informal medium where you can just write whatever you want, regardless of grammar or syntax, to a point where you're kind of expected to maintain certain standards. So this evolution has happened very quickly, because compared to the first text, which was sent 20 years ago, which was simply Happy Christmas, with, I think, no punctuation because they knew not to do that, to the kind of complex text that you can do now, it shows that not only is text communication evolving, but it's evolving at a rate incredibly faster than human or spoken verbal communication ever evolved, because we don't have to rely simply on random process of evolution. We have technology and mass culture pushing it along. So, so what does the future of texting look like? Well, I think, like I said before, the symbols are going to play a bigger part, and that as we continue texting more and more, these conventions that are kind of starting to form, like the idea that saying hey with 5 Y's afterwards isn't necessarily the best idea, these kind of like rough ideas will start to take more concrete shape in the coming years, because as more and more people text more and more often, a kind of abstract set of conventions and rules for texting will begin to form in the collective consciousness. Additionally, these conventions and rules become more and more complex to fit our natural level of need that we have due to the fact that we're texting for every situation imaginable. So, until then, however, we generally, the younger generations who are the ones spending the most time on cell phones texting, as the primary users and owners of this emerging form of interpersonal communication, we must make a real effort to be very conscientious about how we text, what we text, and how we interpret the text of other people. So despite the seemingly casual nature of texting, because of the huge role it plays in how we communicate, it's very important that we give it its due. However, it would not be the worst thing in the world if we spent a little less time communicating face to screen and a little bit more time communicating face to face.